Welcome to Bible History. We're now in Term 2 and Lesson 6. Let's begin by reciting our beloved historical outline together in unison. We'll start with universal dealings and then we'll go down. So now together, universal dealings. Patriarchal, 2166 to 1876 BC. Egypt, 1876, 1446 BC. Wilderness, 1446 to 1406. Conquest, 1406 to 1050. United Kingdom, 1050 to 930. Divided Kingdom, 930 to 586. Babylon exile, 586 to 538. Persian, 538 to 323. Greek, 323 to 167 BC. Maccabean, 167 to 63 BC. Roman period, 63 BC to 400 AD. Well, there you've got it. We've noted 5 oppressions in the Judges, and today we begin with the Ammonite oppression. This is oppression number 6. Well, who are the Ammonites? Number 1, they're descendants of Ammon. Sometimes it's written Ben-Ammi, which means the son of my kinsman. So it's a son of Lot by his second daughter in an incestuous affair. Number 2, they are perennial enemies of Israel. Number 3, their kingdom or state was east of the Jordan on the east side of Reuben and Gad. Number 4, David fought the Ammonites at Rabbah. There Uriah the Hittite was murdered in the battle because of David's sin. Well, Israel has again submerged herself into the cesspool of apostasy, and things are shaping up for a repeat of the Judges syndrome: sin, suffering, supplication, and then salvation or deliverance. Well, this time God will use Jephthah, the son of a harlot from Gilead, as a deliverer for his people. You know the story. Jephthah makes a vow to God that he will sacrifice the first thing that meets him at home after his glorious victory that the Lord gave. It was a rather foolish vow, hasty, not needed whatsoever. There's something about Jephthah's vow that Wood discusses whether he actually offered his daughter as a sacrifice or whether he dedicated his daughter as a living sacrifice to Jehovah as a perpetual virgin, not to be married and bear children, which in that society was almost worse than physical death. Wood mentions 3 things about a human sacrifice if he did offer her as a sacrifice. Number 1, to offer her as a sacrifice would be contrary to Mosaic law and Israelite practice. If he offered her as a sacrifice, there's not a word or hint of disapproval in the scriptural record here. Number 2, Jephthah did hold respect for God and his law. Number 3, Jephthah would have offered her, if he offered her as a human sacrifice, at a proper place, at the tabernacle. And the priests certainly would have rejected such an act. Jephthah was a bit of an unorthodox character, but he did some good things and is included in the Hall of Faith in Hebrews 11. Jephthah fought a meaningless war against the Ephraimites who provoked him with their jealousy about why he didn't give them more prominence in the battle against the Midianites. It was a petty, ridiculous jealousy that caused the needless death of many. Then came the judgeships of Ibzan Elon, and Abdon. These are minor judges of which we know little. Now we come to the Philistine oppression, and this is round number 7, oppression number 7, counting Shamgar. We have 7 of them. The Philistines are resident people coming over into Israel, plundering, stripping the land of its produce and crops. Most of the oppressors up to this time have basically done the same thing, but the Philistines will be an oppressor with a difference. First of all, they're right in the land given by God to Israel, similar to the Canaanites previously. They have not been permanently subjugated nor dislodged. They're strong and vibrant. They're congregated on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea to the southern end of Palestine. They have Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Gath, Ekron, the 5 big cities associated with the Philistines. Well, the Philistines were not originally from here. They had been migrating into this area over the previous 2 centuries. Sometimes they're called the Sea Peoples, coming from the islands in the Mediterranean Sea. They were looking for more land and opportunity, so they migrated from these small islands of the sea, like Crete and others, over to the big mainland of Palestine. As a result, they were very aggressive. They had a sense of courage. They had come as migrants into this new land, looking for a future. So they weren't laid back. They were ready to fight to get ahead. And they really wanted to subjugate extra land and grow their future. And this made them a different type of enemy. These enemies are playing for keeps. They aren't just coming to plunder and strip the resources and then go back home. No, they want the land, they want to develop it, they want to use it. So they're fighting for control and not just for what they can get out of it in a temporary sense. So this is a situation very serious and more threatening to Israel than other oppressions have been. The Philistines were also against the Canaanites who were living inland in northern Israel. This oppression lasts about 40 years, so it's a long, hard haul for Israel. We see Israel progressively indulging in disobedience, and the consequences are becoming more complex and difficult. And in response to the need, God raises up Samson, a very colorful Bible character. What child doesn't like to hear about Samson, this great man with his big biceps and so strong? He's generally pictured as one great man like Charles Atlas or something. One great preacher I heard contended that Samson didn't look like a Charles Atlas with big bulging biceps. He said he was more likely a skinny little fellow who didn't appear to be strong. And that would have contributed to the surprise at his accomplishments and further proved that the Lord was giving him this strength to do whatever he was doing. And people couldn't understand how he could do it. Well, I don't know who's right. But it's true, if he looks like one of these wrestlers or giants with huge muscles bulging all over his body, then you wouldn't think he'd need a whole lot of help from the Lord to do what he is going to do. I think I'll vote for an ordinary-looking man who always surprised people with the supernatural strength which God gave him. After all, when he lost his power with God, he didn't lose his biceps, did he? He still had them. His father was Manoah of the tribe of Dan, but he hadn't migrated north with the other Danites. Samson's birth was very important. It was announced by an angel of Jehovah to his parents. And they were godly people who feared the Lord They asked the angel to teach him how to do with this child that would be born to a mother that was barren. They offered a sacrifice, and the angel ascended in the flame of the fire to heaven, and it scared them. They thought they'd seen God and they might not live. Samson was dedicated to the Lord. He would be a Nazirite from his birth, which was something very special in the Old Testament. He would live on the border between Israel and the Philistine territory, between Zorah and Eshtaol. This is in the south of Judah, and therefore it may not be so well known in other places about his work, because he's way down there. Samuel will be ministering in the center part of the country, perhaps some of the time that Samson is in the south. Samson's ministry is going to be different. He'll not lead an army. He won't assemble people together. Rather, it will be all a one-on-one basis, personal work, you might call it. His job is to more or less just throw a kink into the operations of the Philistines, complicate their work, scare them once in a while, and demonstrate to them that the God of Israel is superior to the God of the Philistines. So this will be a unique type of ministry, but you can be sure that God is going to use Samson's feats to do a special work in the hearts of the Philistines. Samson's work will prepare them for what God will do some years later when David faces Goliath, the Philistine giant. It is said that the Spirit of the Lord came upon him and moved him. So he was enabled by the Lord to carry on a ministry of disruption through these incidents that will irritate the Philistines to no end. Quite interesting, isn't it? His feats of strength at the wedding occasion. He goes down to marry this Philistine girl. His parents weren't approving of it. God didn't approve of it either, but he wanted it. And on the way, Samson encounters a lion among the orchards. The Spirit of the Lord enables him to rend the lion barehandedly and slay it. His parents didn't see the incident. Later, when he returned, he saw the lion's carcass with a swarm of bees in it with their honeycomb. And Samson used this incident to make up his riddle at the wedding feast. He was asked, because they learned the answer to his riddle from his wife, he was asked to contribute 30 suits to give to the Philistines. So he just went out to Ashkelon and killed him 30 well-dressed Philistines and fulfilled his obligation. They early learned that he was a real public nuisance. In another situation during wheat harvest, there's a lot of good wheat country down there, he caught 300 foxes, something like this one, tied their tails together. I don't know how he did it. Foxes aren't so gentle, and I can assure you that they would become vicious when you start tying their tails together. Then he set them alight with fire and turned them loose in the ripe wheat fields. Great fun, Samson style. You can just imagine these foxes running at high speed through this dry wheat field, setting it on fire. It would have done a lot of damage. The Philistines are furious, but they had provoked him. What a nuisance he is. In another incident, he killed 1,000 Philistines with a fresh jawbone of a donkey. Then he was so thirsty, and God gave him water out of the jawbone he just used. There were so many supernatural things happening around Samson. Quite the fella. He had a judgeship of 20 years. That means that people looked up to him and considered him as a divinely appointed irritator of the Philistines that cramped their style and imposed a fear and restraint upon their occupation of Israel. His first wife was burned by the Philistines to get even with him. In a later event, he goes to a harlot one time in Gaza. Then he took off the huge gates of Gaza along with the posts and the bar and carries them the long uphill road to Hebron, which is no small feat, I assure you. Finally, he meets up with Delilah, who lived in the valley of Sorek. Sorek wasn't far from where he lived. Here are some views of that valley. She was really a match for Samson, really tricky. And her superiors, the Philistine lords, paid her an unbelievable amount of money to do Samson in. It would be equivalent to an ordinary wage for a person for a period of about 55 years. It would be an absolute fortune. That's pretty good superannuation, wouldn't you say? So she set her mind to discover the secret of Samson's strength. And it isn't anywhere close to his biceps, folks. They had no idea what his secret was. The strength wasn't in the hair itself. It was in his vow as being separated to God. The hair was only a sign of that dedication. You know the story, how she kept nagging him until finally he would tell her the secret. With succeeding incidents, you can note that each time he's getting closer and closer to the truth that will allow his enemies to ruin him. And finally, he tells Delilah the truth, and she betrays him to the Philistines while he's asleep in her arms. "Samson, the Philistines be upon thee!" And he awoke out of a sleep and said, "I will go out as at other times before, and shake myself." And he wist not that the Lord was departed from him. Then he's blinded by the Philistines and made to grind at a mill as a lowly animal. His faith returned to God eventually. His hair grew back as a sign of that dedication. And one day the Philistines are having a huge feast in the temple of Dagon, like a covered amphitheater. They're making sport and mocking, and what better comedian could they have than blind Samson to show him off to the crowd in their boast that their God was greater than the God of Israel whom Samson represented. "Look what our God Dagon did to the mighty Samson, who had done all these supernatural feats. But at the end, our God overcame." Samson looked to God. "Oh God, I'm sorry for my sin. See your enemies, Lord. Please return my strength. Let me magnify your great name among these heathen just one more time. Please, God." And he took hold of two of the center pillars of that temple. He bowed himself, and God infused him with supernatural strength, and the whole temple comes crashing down, killing 3,000 prominent Philistines, and Samson with them. More Philistines were killed in his death than all that he was able to kill while he was alive. It does seem sad, though, that his life should end in this fashion. It is perplexing to assess Samson's life and some things that he did. Yet the Spirit of God did come upon him for many feats. He's included in the great list of heroes of faith in Hebrews 11, so there must be a background of faith in his life. But note some of the facts. According to Numbers 6, verses 1 to 6, Samson violated all three restrictions put upon him as a Nazirite. Number 1, not to touch wine. Number 2, not to cut his hair. Number 3, not to touch a dead body. He violated the law of God, and he had to pay the price for it, unfortunately. There's an interesting contrast between Samson's life and the history of Israel, but I'll just give it to you quickly. Number one, God's plan for his life was revealed before his birth. So it was with Israel. Number two, when he kept his vow, he had supernatural blessing. So Israel. Number three, Samson often tempted God in departing from the law. So did Israel. Number four, each time he was bound, God's strength delivered him. Number five, God's patience finally runs out and leaves Samson to his own folly. Number six, then his enemies can blind him and oppress him. And so they did with Israel. Number seven, finally, returns in repentance to God, and God hears. And so it was with Israel. Notice Edersheim's quote about Samson, how he uses God's gift for his self-indulgence, and then finally betrays it and loses it. Samson had ceased to be a Nazirite in heart before he ceased to be one outwardly. Someone else has said, behind every tragedy in human character, there is a process of wrong and wicked thinking. Yes, before a person falls outwardly, it has been going on inwardly for a long time. There has been an inward compromising, an accommodating of sin, a harboring of wrong, until gradually the person becomes enmeshed in the power of that sin, until one day it appears outwardly and everyone says, how could it have happened? How could he do it? But it's been going on for a long time. Samson has ceased to be a Nazirite inwardly long before he displayed it outwardly. God's will was thwarted in Samson's life, yet God overruled it for good. Carroll disagrees here. He gives Samson more credit than most of us give him. He does make some good points, however. Number one, Samson never led Israel into sin like Gideon. Number two, he never led Israel into idolatry. Number three, he was listed in the list of the heroes of faith in Hebrews 11. And number four, he never bragged about his sin. Well, maybe Carroll makes us realize that though Samson did make some bad mistakes, he may have had some good motivations that we don't readily perceive. And Samson did some good things and did avoid some bad mistakes that others have made. Certainly God knows the heart and the motivation. You know, sometimes we can do the right things but have the wrong motivation. Or sometimes we make a mistake though we have a good motivation in the heart. When Samson died, his brethren came down to Gaza and brought his body back to his family burial place between Zorah and Eshtaol in the family inheritance of the tribe of Dan, where he was buried. The tomb of Samson is still there today. More space is devoted in the Judges to the record of Samson's life than any other judge except Gideon. So the Bible takes a lot of time talking about what Samson did. A mention is made 4 times of the Spirit coming upon him and doing this work through him. He seems a strange character, a bit of a paradox, and we wonder about him, and yet we know he was a man of God whom God greatly used. There's no question that he was divinely appointed to oppose the Philistines, which he did. Samson was looking for occasions to quarrel with the Philistines and to make their lives difficult. But there are things, however, that he is to be blamed for. Number one, his lust for women, especially Philistine women. This led him to strife in his life. Now God overruled that and used those incidents to avenge Israel of the Philistines. But you put it down, that doesn't do away with the fact that Samson had a weakness that he should not have indulged. Had he gained victory over those weaknesses, he could have been a greater man, and God could have used him in a greater way. Number 2, Samson showed a weak attitude towards obedience to the law. From the very beginning, he was careless about his God-given vow. Another lesson from his life, number 3, it is never right to do wrong in order to get a chance to do right. Simply, you don't go rob a bank to give the money to the poor. It's wrong to rob a bank. It's good to give to the poor, but it's wrong to rob a bank in order to be able to give to the poor. This brings up the time-old question, does the end justify the means? Some say, well, the means I am using are not good, I know that, but they are justified by the end result that I am being able to attain. When I was a very young man, we had this big issue about Billy Graham, an evangelist and ecumenical evangelism. At that time, Billy Graham changed his policy of cooperation in the sponsorship of his large evangelistic crusades. Up to that time, Billy Graham had said he would only cooperate with Bible-believing churches. And if a pastor church did not believe in the deity of Christ, the virgin birth, the inspiration of the Bible, salvation by faith alone, then they would not be welcome to cooperate in sponsoring his crusades to win people to Christ. They could attend, but they could not be on the sponsoring committee. Then at that time, Billy Graham changed his policy and basically said that he would accept all churches and all ministers without exception to help sponsor his campaigns, regardless of their belief. Everybody can be a part of it, he said. And he no doubt thought that this would give him a greater opportunity to win souls to Christ. This thing became a big issue. As a young pastor, I remember among the churches and the Christians, many Bible-believing churches and Christians defended Billy Graham, contending that it wasn't the right way to do it, but they said, look at how God is using Billy Graham, and look at all the thousands of people who are coming to Christ, even many out of the churches who don't preach the gospel. So, the end justifies the means. If souls are being saved, then you shouldn't say that it is wrong. Some of my friends went one way and others went another way, but one should ask himself in such a situation, what is right? Is it right to cooperate with people who deny the very book of God that is being preached? People who don't believe the gospel nor the deity of Christ? Should I cooperate and participate with such people as if they are born-again Christians and as if we are all the same, when in fact we are two totally opposite peoples going two different directions? Is it right? You don't have to look at the result. The right road leads out to the right place, but you can't look at a particular result and say, well, people are being saved, and it doesn't make any difference what we do to help that happen. We have to ask, what does the Bible teach about getting together with unbelievers? Well, it says, be ye not unequally yoked together with unbelievers. I remember one time Billy Graham had a campaign out in western United States, and he had this bishop of the Methodist Church by the name of Bromley Oxnam, who said it was not very nice language. I hesitate to even repeat it, but he said the God of the Old Testament was a dirty bully. He just pushing people around. He was cruel and he's vile. But Billy Graham had this man on his sponsoring committee of his evangelistic campaign, and he had him get up in the meetings and lead in prayer. And I wonder if Dr. Oxnam, when he addressed his prayer to God, did he call him the dirty bully as well? Can you imagine such a man, a wicked, godless unbeliever, leading in prayer? But it's okay, because souls are being saved. But some souls got saved out of Oxnam's church. How wonderful! The gospel would never have gotten to such people in a church like that had Billy Graham not included this false prophet on his sponsoring committee. So it's okay, right? Well, that's the issue. Does the end justify the means? Is it allowable to do something wrong in order to get an opportunity to do something that's right and good? The Bible says no. It is not right. It's sin and disobedience to him that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him it is sin, even if it gets good results. Billy Graham continued in this trend until at the end he was including Catholics on his committee. He preached in Poland in the Catholic Church, where the present Pope of the Roman Church was. And why do Catholics have him? Because they're smarter than he is. They decided they could use his popularity to reinvigorate their people, believing that they would just become better Catholics, more vibrant and more faithful to the church. They understood that Billy Graham would not strike at the basis of their church and that he did not pose a threat to them, and they have been correct in their assessment. Many Catholics today use biblical terms and language all mixed in with their damnable doctrines that pervert the true gospel of Christ. Well, Samson could have accomplished much more in his life had he walked according to the book, the law of God, been faithful to his vows, been a man of holiness and spirituality. He didn't have to indulge his sinful weaknesses to be used of God. The end did not justify the means. It could have been better had he walked with God. I'm glad that God can use us in spite of our weaknesses, but we must realize that sin always hinders and does lessen our usefulness for God. There's an article in the supplementary material of Systematic Theology, how that you could fall into sin and destroy your usefulness in the ministry and perhaps even destroy your very ministry. The point of view in this article was that falling into the sin of adultery could even disqualify a person for further ministry as a pastor or preacher. Now, people argue whether it disqualifies or not according to the Scriptures, but there can be no argument about the fact that a person who has fallen into adultery while in the ministry, were he to return to the ministry, would do so with greatly lessened effectiveness. The shame that comes by such behavior will follow the person wherever he goes and cast a shadow over his credibility and ministry. Samson could have kept his passions in check and have been a great spiritual example to the generations. And he could have done untold feats and had a testimony that would have affected many millions of people. Sin never pays. Today, many preachers fall into sin, divorce, remarry, continue right on pastoring. One man I know divorced his wife, or she divorced him, and he went right out and created a new doctrine and proving that what he was doing was right. He remarried and continued to pastor, and he probably wrote it in a book. Well, you know, it's just as if sin doesn't cost anything anymore. Well, in summary, the wheel in Judges has turned over 7 times, showing us the syndrome being repeated each time. Some vivid lessons we might note here. Number 1, sin is no respecter of persons. It affects even a great Samson. Number 2, sin always exacts its toll. There is a price to be paid, wages to be received. Samson had to pay that. Number 3, sin never leaves us like it finds us. It cripples us. It blinds us. Number 4, when we fall away from Him, He is merciful and will answer if we will cry unto Him in repentance. And certainly the Lord did with Samson. At the same time that Samson was exercising his disruptive ministry in southern Judah on the border with Philistia, we have Samuel judging in Israel proper, based in the central part of Israel. Samuel was called a judge, but he's much more than that. He was a prophet and a qualified priest, and he was recognized as such from Dan in the north to Beersheba in the south. For this reason, some authors do not include his name in the list of judges, but he did judge Israel, and I believe we should include him in the list of judges. Under Samuel's ministry, the monarchy will be instituted, though it was not God's idea, nor his. It was an idea of the people who wanted to be like the other nations. Samuel was a Levite. His mother was Hannah, one of 2 wives of Elkanah. From that standpoint, he didn't have a completely happy home. The recipe for a happy, unified home is not to have 2 wives like Elkanah had. Yet Samuel overcame the negatives that came from that part of his life. We don't have to be captives of things that we inherited or encountered, nor do we have to repeat the mistakes of others or our parents. Many times we do, and by nature we just come back and fall into the same pattern and mistakes, even though we may despise the same things in our parents. We can break the chain, break out of that mold, and be what God wants us to be. Whatever the situations were in Samuel's home, he was able to be an overcomer and be greatly used of the Lord in a most unusual way. What's more beautiful than the story of how his mother promised him to God before he was born? When he was very young, she brought him to the tabernacle at Shiloh. Eli the high priest was very learned in the scriptures and taught them to young Samuel. We see the work of God in the life of this young man as the Lord speaks to him there at Eli's. Finally, Eli determines that the Lord is calling Samuel. So Samuel goes back to his bed, and when the Lord calls again, he says, "Speak, Lord, for thy servant heareth." This young lad had a great heart for God and would be greatly used of the Lord. As a lad, he was so faithful. God could trust him and told him, "I'm going to send judgment upon Eli and his house for what he's allowing his sons to do, and his house will be cut off from the priesthood." That was a very difficult task for Samuel to do, to give this terrible message to a man that he loved, like Eli, a man who was teaching him and taking care of him. For him to have to tell Eli such a sad message from the Lord, that God is displeased with Eli and that he's going to cut Eli and his sons off from the priesthood. But God could trust that young lad to do this faithfully. This set the tone for his later life. And if God can't trust you now for the little things, then He can't trust you in the big things. Most of us want the big things now. We want God to do a great work through us now, but we're not willing to be faithful in the little things first. If God can't trust you here in Bible college to be faithful, to use your time, to do your best in your studies, then He can't use you later either. If you can't be faithful in that which is little, how do you think that God is going to put you into that which is much and use you? He won't. If you can't trust somebody with $10, would you have the heart to give him 1,000 and see what happens? Of course not. As we're faithful in little things, He entrusts more to us. Samuel was faithful in the little until God could trust him in really great, important things. That's the secret of life. Just be faithful in what God has been giving you to do. Do the job at hand, regardless of how small or insignificant it is. Do it faithfully unto Him, and God will someday give you more. God is in the day of small things. I know students who mucked around here in college. They weren't faithful in their studies, not faithful in their work, all the while dreaming how when they get out of school they're going to be great servants of the Lord. It was a pipe dream, something that's not going to happen. It is required in stewards that a man be found faithful. Learn faithfulness in the little things, the little routines of life. Then you'll be prepared for greater things when God can trust you. Samuel only had one known mistake in his life that we know about. What was it? Well, he did wrong in regards to his sons who did not walk with the Lord, and he gave them a job that they weren't worthy of. He so badly wanted his sons to serve the Lord as he had, and he shouldn't have done it. It was a mistake. He repeated the mistake of Eli, his mentor. He should have told those boys, no way you're going to do this. Your heart's not in it. He may have thought, well, if I give them a holy spiritual responsibility, maybe they'll shape up and get their lives right with God. Sometimes we fall into this wrong philosophy of thinking that we should give a spiritual job to a carnal person that is not fit for it, thinking that maybe it will change the person, he'll become okay. Give people a lolly stick. Give them what they want. Don't fall into that trap, folks. There are circumstances where fearful and weak people who just haven't found their niche will respond to a responsibility which you can give them. It helps them to just glow and they respond to the challenge. But they must have a good testimony and have a spiritual desire. I've encouraged many fearful and immature people to get involved because I could see spiritual potential in them. They had a heart for God, but they just needed that little push and that little encouragement. And this is an important factor in developing workers and leaders in the churches. But to give a spiritual job to a troublemaker or a carnal person with an ungodly testimony may be a big, big mistake. There's a big difference between the two approaches, and we must learn the difference. When carnal people take on spiritual authority and leadership, and they exercise that authority or leadership carnally, it will drain the spiritual life out of the church. So just be careful. The Philistines are at Aphek, according to 1 Samuel 4. And to get the true picture here, let's first get some background. Let's know two very important caravan trade routes that cross Palestine from the north to the south, or vice versa. Number one, the King's Highway. This connected the capitals of Edom with the capital of Selah or Petra, Moab, their capital was Kir Moab, and Ammon, their capital was Rabbah. And then the King's Highway went on to Damascus. You can note this road at the top of this diagram. You'll remember that Israel asked Edom for passage on the King's Highway on her way to Canaan, but was refused passage by Edom. Number two, the Way of the Sea. This is also called the Via Maris, the Latin name. Some refer to it as the International Coastal Highway. Note this map that shows three strategic points on this highway. Gezer in the south, Megiddo in the middle, and Hazor in the northeast. Basically, it connected Egypt to Turkey and Mesopotamia with more than one branch or lane in specific areas. It includes towns like Ashkelon, Ashdod, Joppa, Aphek, Megiddo, Then from Megiddo you might swing east to Hazor on to Damascus. Or you might go straight on up north and remain by the sea and pass through Lebanon, as many did. Note one important point. The area from Aphek to Megiddo only allowed a single compressed lane or branch of traffic. So these two passes, Aphek on the south and Megiddo on the north of the plain of Sharon, are most important. Aphek guarded the entrance to the southern end of the Sharon plain. It's also the location of the headwaters of the Yarkon River that drains a large swampy area in the plain. So it was like a choke point with the swamps on one side and the hill country of western Samaria on the other side. So it was a very important place because it guarded the passage of all the caravans on that road. This geography will help us understand why the Philistines were battling for Aphek as well as making it a base for their other operations. Aphek boasted a good water supply and a strategic location for international travel. It had been occupied since before 4000 BC, they tell us, and each civilization was built on the top of the previous. You remember the previous cutout of a tell. In those ancient times, it was customary to build and live in the same place. Maybe there were occupations that kept them there. Maybe it was near a main road that they would guard. And of course, there would certainly be a good source of fresh water. And each civilization would build on top of the old one. The added height meant added security as well. So the archaeologists simply peel away each layer, and this opens up a window to understand better the life and culture of the people of that day. Note some facts about Aphek. Number one, Joshua destroyed Aphek, and he killed its king after entering Canaan, according to the book of Joshua. Number two, Aphek is mentioned in the allotment of land given to the tribes. Number three, the Egyptians built a palace for their governor here sometime around the 1300s to 1200s. It was quite large, and here are some of its ruins. Large rooms, amazing place. Number four, the Philistines occupied Aphek in the 11th century. They left behind objects like figurines of their gods and goddesses, clay tablets. Here's one. Scholars haven't been able to decipher it yet, the language that they were using on it. By the 10th century, archaeology can demonstrate unmistakably that the Israelites were back in control of Aphek. So it basically shows that the Philistines left it for a long time and Israel got back in. Number five, Herod, in the time of the New Testament, rebuilt Aphek and named it Antipatris, after his father Antipater. Here is the main street of the city during the Roman times, which was about 9 meters wide with shops on both sides. So that's 2,000 years old, folks. You'll remember that the Roman soldiers who escorted the Apostle Paul from Jerusalem, where Paul was the object of a planned assassination attempt, they took him to Antipatris overnight, then on to Caesarea, where he would be in custody for 2 years. So Paul probably walked on some of this road. Number six, the Turks of the Ottoman Empire erected this fort in 1572 AD to guard the important Via Maris Road, the international highway. They cleared off a bit of the rubble at the top and then built their fort on the preceding levels. each one representing a civilization. Extensive archaeology has been done under the Turkish fort. And one archaeologist commented, he said, we can count the centuries as we go down the stairs. We're going from the 16th century AD back to the 13th century before Christ. Well, look at this view of Tel Afek, just some various pictures of the fort and surrounding area. To look at these views is to relive history of thousands of years. Now, when we read Afek, we'll know more about it and how important that it is. The Philistines have made their way up the Via Maris, deep into Israelites' territory, and established control up to Afek. Afek is west and north of Shiloh, as you can see on the map. It's not far from Shiloh. In our lesson, Israel attempts to challenge Philistine control by a direct military confrontation at Ebenezer, which is just very near to Afek. The attempt failed, Israel was defeated, and they lost 4,000 men. They then thought, well, that we might get victory if we could just get the ark in from Shiloh. So they bring the ark in, and with the idea, if we get the ark in, we can just turn God loose and He'll take care of the enemy. It didn't work. That wasn't God's thinking. The ark was taken by the Philistines, and the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, along with 30,000 men of Israel, died. Eli fell off his chair when he heard the bad news. He broke his neck and died. The whole episode was an absolute disaster. Then the Philistines moved directly into more Israelite territory as far as Shiloh, which they destroyed, and placed their military garrison right there. But it was all a terrific victory for the Philistines. They destroyed the metal industry that Israel was trying to develop, and at the end of the story, they have to go down to the Philistia to even sharpen their shares. What a terrible defeat it was. It was a dark time in Israel's history. Those people who loved the Lord and were godly must have felt that they were staring Antichrist in the face. In New Testament terminology, they would have said to each other, how much worse can things get? How long will it be before the Lord comes? And we say that all the time, and we wonder how things could get any worse, and yet they seemingly do continue to get worse. Wicked men wax worse and worse and worse. And that's the way it was in Israel. People were saying, how bad can it get? How dark can it be? Well, Samuel was God's man, and though it looked impossible, he had faith in God. He had good preparation. He had a godly mother. His own birth was an answer to her prayer, and he'd been taught the scriptures by Eli. He had good heritage. He believed God could work, that He had a plan, and that they didn't have to be enslaved to these circumstances. And so that's exactly what we need around here. We need faith to rise above any depressing circumstances, that God is able to work through them and over them and give us the victory, and He can use us. Our problem is not organization. It's not methods. We're the problem. And when we get things set right in ourselves and get our lives right with God, God will do His work. And Samuel recognized the darkness of the day, but he believed that God had a plan and that there was hope. And so he established schools for the prophets where God would call young men, and He could train them there and get them ready for a ministry of faith and blessing. Someone asked me recently, where are we going to get students for the Bible college? I said, well, that's simple. Why, the Bible says, pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest, and He will send forth laborers into His harvest. Don't you believe the Lord is working now in the lives of young people in our churches? Why, of course we do. Don't you believe that God is always tugging at the hearts of people to prepare to go into full-time Christian service and do His work? Is God lazy? Is He on holiday? Has something happened to Him? No. Let's pray to the Lord that He'll bring circumstances into the lives of people in whom He is working, so that they will say, I need to prepare myself for greater service. I need to go to Bible college. And that's what will happen, and we'll have students. And Samuel said, that's what we need. God will call. We need a place to train them. So he established these schools and did a wonderful job for God. So he trained others. Well, Samuel served for 20 years. Things are turning around. People are looking to the Lord. Now we come to Mizpah. Let's take some background quickly. Number one, Israel met at Mizpah to decide what to do with the Benjamites about the behavior of the homosexuals at Gibeah. Number two, after the loss of the ark at Aphek, Samuel conducts a spiritual meeting at Mizpah. Revival ignites. The Philistines are routed after God sends a terrific thunderstorm. Number three, Samuel traveled annually to Mizpah in his circuit of judging in Israel. Number four, King Asa fortified Mizpah against the attacks of the north. Number five, the Babylonians put Gedaliah as governor in Mizpah, and Jeremiah was there as well for a time. Number six, men from Mizpah helped Nehemiah repair the wall of Jerusalem. That's some background. Well, we're concerned with the second incident at Mizpah. There's the kindling of a new flame of faith in the hearts of people, and people are expecting something from God, and they feel like things are turning around, and so they got together at Mizpah. It's basically not many kilometers from Jerusalem, on the outer ring with Ramah and Gibeon. But just imagine the great gathering here with Samuel speaking to that great multitude. It's a special revival service. They have come here to confess their sins, to honor the Lord, and seek Him for a time of spiritual refreshing at Mizpah. Well, the Philistines had their spies and their intelligence out nosing around, and they noticed this great group of people going to Mizpah and thought, oh, they're trying to do something. They're up to something. We got to take the initiative here, and we got to strike them before they do something. Well, Samuel and the people cried in fear unto the Lord. The Lord answered from heaven and sent a terrific, violent thunderstorm right in the time of year when it would never come, because rain is seasonal there. So such a storm scared the daylights out of these superstitious pagans, and this isn't the time when a thunderstorm can come. The God of Israel is doing this, and they fled in panic, and Israel took after them, and there was a great slaughter and victory for Israel. The Philistines were so demoralized that they withdrew from Aphek back to their little corner in Philistia and didn't bother Israel again during Samuel's time. What a miracle. And it was all of the Lord from the beginning to the end, but it happened because the people were spiritually minded, prepared, and God could work. Let's talk quickly about the return of the ark. Dagon, the image of Dagon, the name Dagon is possibly from a word meaning fish, the fish god, protector of the sea. So Dagon may well have been the fish god, which had the body of a fish and the head and hands of a man. Some people today make the fish a symbol of Christianity. I don't quite get the point of that. They got a good imagination. Back before, when the Philistines took the ark and put it into the temple of Dagon, that Dagon fell to the floor overnight and eventually lost his head. Finally, the Philistines decided to send the ark back to Israel because it was causing havoc and disasters and plagues everywhere they sent it. So the Philistine priests used some trickery. They sent the ark on a new cart, hitched it to a new cows that had not been broken to pull a wagon, and they took the baby calves away from the cows to provoke them, thinking maybe that the cows would bolt in the harness and jerk the wagon and maybe run away, and that the ark might fall off and break into 1,000 pieces and thus destroying its power. They didn't dare do it themselves, but if the cows did it, never mind. But it didn't work. God intervened, and the cows went down the road towards Israel, away from their calves, completely against their instincts, doing what was contrary to their nature. God intervened. After the Philistines destroyed Shiloh, the tabernacle was moved to Nob. the ark remained near Beit Shemesh at Kirjath Jearim. There must be a significant biblical reason why Samuel, who was a good spiritual leader, didn't bring the ark back to the tabernacle. Perhaps the Lord gave him some instructions about this, since the ark remains there for 70 to 100 years. Well, that's it for today. God bless you. See you next week, the Lord willing.